Hi, this is Hugh Halter. Excited to be with you for a little bit of a journey on the Bivo option that's out there right now in the church leadership and church world. We're going to get started a little bit with my story just so you can get to know who I am and why I'm actually talking to you out of all the different people that lead churches and whatever. Our story is unique. Written some books about some early days of doing ministry a little bit differently than you would normally expect, going through seminary, starting in a church, and then making a full living. Our story really began, honestly, when I was probably in 8th or ninth grade. I felt called to ministry, honestly. In 8th grade, I felt like I was going to be a pastor, and then our life fell apart. My mom and dad got divorced, and my dad was actually out of work for about 8 years. Through junior high up through early college, and I had to go to work full-time as a sophomore in high school just to try to help our family survive. And so work became sort of something that I had to do early on. I don't think I liked it. I worked 100 hours a week at a fireworks warehouse and just slept on cardboard boxes trying to make as much money as I could to keep kind of my mom going as the divorce happened. And then went off to school, got a partial athletic scholarship, but it was a private education, so I realized I wasn't going to be able to afford it, couldn't get any help from mom and dad. And so I went down to a paint store, and I asked a local paint rep, I said, how do you paint a house like to make money? And he took about a half hour and actually showed me. He just said, look, you're going to need all of this stuff. And so I bought that with the last $800 that I had. I bought all this, big ladder. I put it on the top of one of those 1972 Honda Civic hatchbacks. So I had a 40-foot extension ladder hanging off both sides. And then I said, okay, so how do I get work? And he said, go to the richest neighborhood in Seattle, which was Bellevue, Washington. And he goes, just nail up a sign on a telephone post and you'll probably get some work. And so I did that. And within 20 minutes, I got my first phone call and acted like a house painter and completely screwed up the house, but made a lot of money. In fact, I was making so much money that I hired a friend of mine. And so for the summers in between the years of college, we made about $10,000 a piece, and we'd water ski every morning. And so this was in the early 1980s. So we were making a ton of money, and it enabled me to get through college on my way to seminary. So at the time I just thought, I'm just going to do this until I get to seminary, and then we'll eventually be a full-time pastor. So ended up in Portland, Oregon, and entered seminary. And I thought I'd do a 3-year MDiv program, and was working UPS at nights, and met my wife about halfway through, and she had had a son named Ryan that had really severe epilepsy. And long story short, I married Cheryl and adopted Ryan, and just kind of thought, either God would heal his disability or we'd figure it out. And it got worse and worse and worse to the point where I actually had to leave seminary. And at that point in my sort of ministry calling, and we're going to talk a lot about calling in one of the other sessions, I really wondered if my calling was getting revoked. Like, I just wondered why God was not helping out, and ended up having to go back to the old painting trade. And I got out all my old tools and bought some stuff that I needed, and had a new little Chevy LUV long bed pickup truck that was even older than the Honda Civic, and started painting again. And I remember about 2 years later, my son had to have a brain surgery. And it was going to be about $100,000 out of pocket after health insurance, and we weren't making that much money at all. So I thought, wow, we are probably going to enter bankruptcy in my early mid-20s. And so this church that we were a part of decided to do a fundraiser and raise some money to help us get through the surgery. And people were sort of donating, I guess, sometimes it was things, other times it was trades. And so since I was painting, I said, well, I'll offer up a paint job. And I thought maybe, an old lady would bid a couple $1,000s and I'd do a couple $1,000s worth of work. And ends up, I get a phone call from the pastor of the church. He said, hey, Hugh, I've got good news and bad news. Good news is somebody bid on your paint job. Bad news is that he only paid $50. So I said, no big deal. You guys are raising a lot of money for us. So just give me the address. So I got the address, started to drive to his house one day to meet him and get started. And it was in what was called the Northwest Hills of Portland, which is where all the old 1920 Victorian mansions were at. And I was kind of thinking, $50. I thought there must be like a tent up there or something, like a little lean-to or something I could. Surely somebody would not pay $50 if they had one of these homes. And so I started driving up, and as you get higher, the houses get bigger, and I started to get a little bit nervous. And I found the address, and sure enough, to my dismay, it was about it was like a mansion. It was just over 6,000 square feet. The back of the house was on stilts that went 4 stories down into these big cliffs and blackberry briars. And so I parked my little Chevy Love long bed pickup, and I had a little conversation with the Lord that went something like this. I'm not doing this. And literally, I just was going, there's no way I can do this. We're already broke. This would take me potentially months to do. And I just kind of sat there and was having a hard conversation with the Lord, even thinking about my calling, and I just want to get on with ministry. And as I was trying to figure out a way out of this, I remember feeling, I don't know if you ever get those thoughts, but you kind of think, I think that was from the Lord, but I just remember hearing Hugh paint the house. And I said out loud, I said, no, you paint it. All the stuff's in the back of the pickup truck. You get whatever you need. And sat there for another 15 minutes. And then I called my wife, who is very black and white, loves the Lord, but she's reasonable too. So I thought, I'll explain it to her. So I call her and I tell her what's going on. And she doesn't say anything. And I got a little frustrated. And I said, babe, what do you think? And Cheryl just said, Hugh, paint the house. And first time ever, I hung up on my wife. And I just kind of sat there. I was literally having a crisis of faith and a crisis of calling. And after another half hour, I went up and knocked on Ralph's door. His name was Ralph. He's an old guy. And Ralph did not say, I kind of introduced myself. Hi, I'm Hugh Halter from the church. I'm here to paint your house. And he doesn't say anything nice. He just said, well, just so you know, I don't want you to spray paint my house. I want you to hand paint it 2 coats. And so that's how our relationship started, me and Ralph. And Ralph, as you can imagine, didn't have any friends, so he would come out and try to help me paint all day long and try to give me tips and pointers. And so it got, honestly, a little bit worse. And then his wife, Irma, would make me these egg salad sandwiches with way too much mayonnaise. She would sort of make me choke down every day. So for about 6.5 weeks, me and Ralph and Irma worked on Ralph's house. And I did manage to paint it 2 coats. I also managed to completely lose my sense of calling. I sort of, in the middle of that job, when we were eBaying way before Craigslist, all of our couches and stuff in our home just to try to pay the bills. I remember just going, okay, I guess I'm just going to be a dad and a house painter and forget seminary, forget pastoral work. And that's literally where I was at. I just resigned myself to God must call some, and then other people just work. And so I finished the job and gave Ralph and Irma kind of a big hug. Irma kissed me on the lips. She loved me. And I remember driving down the hill, and I get a phone call from Sam. And Sam was Ralph's son. I didn't know this, but he goes, hey, Hugh, my name's Sam. I'm Ralph's son. I'm wondering if I could have lunch with you. And I said, well, yeah, sure, Sam. I just left your dad's house. And so why don't you meet me in downtown Portland? So we have lunch, and Sam begins to share how he had once had a faith in God, but how working with Christian business people around town, that he had lost his faith about 15 years prior. And he shared more about just, wanting to believe, but he just couldn't believe based on what he saw from Christian workers around the city. And he said, I don't know if you noticed, but he said, I would drive my truck up and I would kind of watch you paint and work with my dad. He goes, I know my dad only paid $50 for that. And he goes, I was sure, knowing that you were a Christian, that you would not paint the house. And I went, well, Sam, I'm a man of my word. And no, I did not say that. I actually said, exactly what I've just told you. I told him the entire crisis of faith and calling, my desire to be in church leadership, told him about my son's epilepsy and our financial struggle. And I said, don't think too highly of me, because I said I pretty much gave up on my faith in this whole thing as well, working on this job. So as I was unloading then all this angst about God, he goes, well, don't feel too bad. He said, the fact that you did it, and the fact that my dad would call me all the time and just talk about you, and my mom would call me every day and just say how much she loved you and how well you were treating my mom and dad. He said, I just want you to know you brought me back. And I said, well, what do you mean I brought you back? And he said, I just somehow I believe in God again. And then he asked me if I would walk him back into his faith and meet with him. And I said, I will do that with you if you will help walk me back into my faith again. And so we did. We started to meet weekly, and Sam grew really faster than me. He was bringing me back, and then Sam had an idea to start building houses for single moms. And so we did that. We set up a nonprofit. And then Sam and I just began to kind of hang out with people that we were working with. He hired me as his primary painter. And so we started to kind of dig out financially, and we led quite a few of our friends to the Lord, people that were working on, different job sites. And eventually it led into our first church plant. And Sam became one of our primary, obviously, funders. One day he called me into his office and he said, Hugh, I want you to buy this condo today. And he slid a piece of paper across the desk, and I signed. He goes, congratulations, you now own this condo. It's brand new. I think you should sell it because of your son's brain surgery. And so he actually gave me the for sale sign that day. We put it in the dirt, sold the condo in a couple hours, and in about 10 days I had a check that paid for most of the brain surgery. So whatever you've heard in my story with Ralph, hopefully you're starting to see that God is behind our work and our calling and our ministry way more than we think he is. And when we can't see around the corner, God is already actually building his church. Your work, my work, is as integrated in the work of the kingdom as you can imagine. And in this next session, we're going to talk a little bit more about the myths of this idea of calling and what that actually means, and debunking some of the misconceptions many of us have grown up with about what the church is, what leadership is, and how to integrate different aspects of life. Really, Bivo is about leveraging all of life into one calling.